The room is cold, sterile, its fluorescent lights flickering like a dying pulse. A young man sits at a metal table, his hands folded neatly, his eyes fixed on a single crack in the wall. He doesn't blink. He doesn't move. But his lips twitch, whispering names, dates, and methods of death. Hundreds, thousands, an endless catalog of murders stretching back centuries. Elizabeth Short, 1947, bisected at the waist, he murmurs. Mary Kelly, 1888, disemboweled. His voice is a monotone, a chilling recitation that fills the air with dread. This is Daniel Kessler, a patient at Willow Creek Psychiatric Hospital in 1996. A man whose mind holds a library of horrors no one can explain. And 3 days ago, he walked out of this hospital. A woman was found dead that same night, her body arranged in a way that echoes a crime from 1923, a case so obscure it was forgotten by all but the most obsessive historians. Until now. What you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a descent into the labyrinth of a mind that knows every way to kill, every way to vanish. Daniel Kessler, diagnosed with autism at age 6, didn't just memorize murders. He studied them, dissected them, and some say perfected them. This case will pull you into a darkness where genius and madness blur, where the line between victim and predator dissolves. How could a man locked in a psychiatric ward for years orchestrate a crime so flawless that the police are still chasing shadows? What drove him to cross the line from observer to architect of death? And the question that will haunt you most, is he still out there planning his next masterpiece? This story isn't for the faint of heart. It's a journey into the fragility of the human mind, where brilliance can twist into something unspeakable. It's about how close any of us might be to the edge, how one wrong step can unravel everything we believe about safety, morality, or control. You're about to uncover a truth so unsettling it might change how you see the world and yourself. If you're ready to dive into this abyss, hit that like button to help others find this chilling tale. In the comments, write, "I'm ready to discover the truth about this story." By doing so, you're joining a community of truth seekers, those brave enough to confront the shadows most avoid. Thank you for being here, for daring to look where others turn away. Prepare yourself, because what comes next contains a key revelation that will forever change the way you see the human mind. The halls of Willow Creek Psychiatric Hospital were always quiet at night, but in the summer of 1996 they carried an eerie weight. Nurses whispered about Daniel Kessler, the patient in room 214, whose voice could sometimes be heard through the walls, reciting details of crimes long buried in dusty archives. Albert Fish, 1934, cannibalism and mutilation, he'd murmur, his tone flat as if reading a grocery list. The Axeman of New Orleans, 1919, throat slit with a straight razor. The staff didn't know whether to be fascinated or terrified. Daniel, then 24, had been admitted at 16 after his parents found him in their basement, surrounded by handwritten notebooks filled with gruesome details of murders spanning centuries. He wasn't violent then, just obsessed. His autism made him fixate, they said, but no one could explain how a boy from a small Ohio town had accessed records of cases so obscure, even seasoned detectives hadn't heard of them. Daniel's mind was a paradox. He barely spoke to others, his eyes often fixed on some invisible point, but when he did speak, it was with surgical precision. He could recall the exact date, location, and method of any murder he'd studied, down to the weather on the day it happened. October 12, 1966, Sherry Jo Bates stabbed 42 times, Riverside, California, partly cloudy, he once told a doctor unprompted during a routine checkup. His memory was photographic, his focus unrelenting. But he was harmless, they thought. A curiosity, a savant trapped in his own world. That summer, though, something shifted. Nurse Emily Carver noticed it first. She'd worked the night shift for years and had grown used to Daniel's murmurs. But in June, his recitations stopped. Instead, he began asking questions. "How do you get blood out of cotton?" he asked her one night, his voice calm, his eyes locked on hers for the first time. Emily laughed it off, assuming it was another odd fixation. But the next night he asked, "How long does it take for a body to be found if it's hidden in plain sight?" Her stomach twisted. She reported it to Dr. Raymond Holt, the head psychiatrist, who dismissed it as Daniel's mind wandering through his endless catalog of horrors. "He's just processing," Holt said. "He's not dangerous." But Emily wasn't so sure. She started watching Daniel more closely. He'd begun sketching in a small notebook, one the staff hadn't seen before. The drawings were meticulous, floor plans, street maps, even diagrams of human anatomy. One page, glimpsed over his shoulder, showed a woman's body, her limbs arranged in a precise, unnatural pose. Emily couldn't shake the image. It reminded her of something she'd read in a true crime book years ago. A case from the 1920s where a victim was staged like a doll, left for the world to find. When she asked Daniel about it, he smiled, a rare, unsettling expression, and said, "It's just practice." By July, Daniel's questions grew stranger. He asked about police response times, about how fingerprints could be obscured, about the chemicals that mask the smell of decay. The staff, overworked and undertrained, didn't connect the dots. They saw him as a patient, not a threat. But Emily couldn't ignore the chill that ran through her when she found Daniel staring out his window one night, whispering, "It has to be perfect." She didn't know what he meant, but the way he said it made her lock her apartment door twice that night. On July 23, 1996, Daniel Kessler vanished from Willow Creek. His room was empty, the window unlatched, his notebook gone. The staff assumed he'd wandered off, as some patients did. The police were called, but their search was half-hearted. Daniel was just another runaway, they figured, a low-risk case. No one noticed that the same night, a woman named Laura Hensley, a 32-year-old librarian, didn't come home from her shift at the local library. Her body was found 3 days later in an abandoned lot. Her arms crossed over her chest, her legs bent at precise angles, her face painted with makeup she never wore. The scene was a perfect replica of a 1923 murder in Chicago, a case so obscure it had faded from public memory. Except it seemed in the mind of Daniel Kessler. The police didn't link Daniel to Laura's death at first. He was just a missing patient, not a suspect. But Emily, haunted by his questions and that chilling smile, went to the station with her suspicions. She told them about his sketches, his fixation, his sudden silence. The detective, a gruff man named Paul Warner, listened with half an ear. "A kid like that?" "He's not a killer," Warner said. "He's just weird." But Emily insisted, her voice trembling as she described the drawing of the posed body. Warner promised to look into it, but his tone was dismissive. Emily left the station feeling like she'd failed Laura, like she'd failed to see the monster hiding in plain sight. As the days passed, the town of Willow Creek buzzed with fear. Laura's murder was the first of its kind in decades, a brutal anomaly in a quiet suburb. The police combed through her life, her routines, but found no enemies, no motives. The crime scene was pristine, no fingerprints, no DNA, no signs of a struggle. It was as if the killer knew exactly how to erase himself from the scene. And in the back of Emily's mind, a single thought gnawed. Daniel wasn't just gone. He was out there, watching, planning, and, worst of all, practicing. Emily Carver couldn't sleep after Laura Hensley's body was discovered. The image of the librarian's corpse posed like a macabre mannequin in that overgrown lot haunted her dreams. It was as if Daniel had stepped out of his notebooks and into reality, bringing with him the ghosts of murders long past. The police had cordoned off the scene, but Emily drove by it every day on her way to work, her eyes drawn to the yellow tape fluttering in the wind like a warning. She knew she should stay out of it, but the gnawing certainty that Daniel was responsible pulled her deeper. One evening after her shift, she visited the library where Laura had worked. The place was quiet, shelves lined with books that now seemed ominous, their spines hiding secrets. Inside, Emily spoke with Laura's colleague, a middle-aged woman named Sarah Mills. Sarah's eyes were red from crying, her hands trembling as she sorted returns. "Laura was so kind," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "She helped everyone, even the odd ones." Emily's heart skipped. Odd ones? Like who? Sarah described a young man who had been coming in for months, always requesting obscure true crime books, newspapers from the early 20th century, and forensic journals. He never checked them out, just read them there, taking notes in a small black notebook. He was quiet, didn't look at you much, Sarah recalled, but he remembered everything. Once I mentioned a book I'd read years ago, and he quoted a passage verbatim. Emily showed her a photo of Daniel from the hospital files she'd discreetly copied. Sarah nodded slowly. "That's him. He was here the day before she disappeared." The revelation hit Emily like a cold wave. Daniel hadn't just escaped. He'd been planning this for months, perhaps years. How had he gotten out of the hospital unnoticed before? The facility's security was lax, but Daniel was under observation. Emily dug deeper on her own, visiting the local archives. There she found records of similar visits. Daniel, or someone matching his description, had been accessing microfilm of old newspapers, focusing on unsolved cases from the 1920s and 1930s. One file stood out: the 1923 Chicago murder of a young woman named Evelyn Thorpe, found posed in a park, her body arranged to mimic a Renaissance painting, down to the folds in her dress. The killer was never caught, the case dismissed as a random act. But Daniel had copied every detail. Meanwhile, Detective Paul Warner was finally taking the case seriously. The autopsy on Laura revealed no defensive wounds, no signs of sexual assault, just a single, precise incision to the throat, severing the carotid artery. Death was quick, almost merciful, but the staging was deliberate, cruel. Warner visited Willow Creek, interviewing Dr. Holt. "This Kessler kid," Warner said, flipping through Daniel's file. "Autistic savant-level memory for murders. You think he's capable?" Holt adjusted his glasses, uncomfortable. Daniel's fixation was academic, not violent, but his questions lately were specific, about crime scenes, evidence. Warner pressed. "And you didn't report it?" Holt shifted. "We thought it was part of his therapy." Warner left the hospital with a growing unease. He assigned officers to search Daniel's old haunts, his parents' home, abandoned since their death in a car accident 2 years prior. The house was a time capsule, dust-covered furniture and stacks of yellowed newspapers. In the basement, where Daniel had spent his childhood, they found walls plastered with timelines of murders, strings connecting cases across decades. One board focused on perfect crimes, unsolved killings where the perpetrator vanished without a trace. Notes in Daniel's neat handwriting detailed flaws in investigations, ways evidence could be manipulated. At the center was a photo of Evelyn Thorpe's crime scene, circled in red. As Warner pieced it together, another body was found. On August 5, 1996, in a nearby park, the corpse of Michael Reed, a 45-year-old accountant, lay sprawled under a tree. His body was arranged with arms outstretched, legs crossed, mimicking the 1931 murder of a businessman in New York, poisoned and left in a public square. But Reed wasn't poisoned, he'd been strangled, his hyoid bone crushed with expert precision. No fingerprints, no fibers, just a single clue, a page torn from an old book tucked into his pocket. It described the 1931 case in detail. The town erupted in panic. Whispers of a serial killer spread, headlines screaming, "The copycat killer strikes again." Emily, hearing the news on the radio, felt a surge of dread. She confronted Warner at the station. "It's Daniel. He's recreating these old murders, improving them." Warner, now haggard from sleepless nights, nodded. "We're looking for him. But he's a ghost. No sightings, no trail." Emily shared what she'd learned at the library and archives. Together they mapped Daniel's patterns. He targeted ordinary people, those without enemies, making motives non-existent. The crimes were spaced days apart, each echoing a different era but all unsolved originals. In the midst of this, a tip came in. A homeless man reported seeing a figure matching Daniel's description in an abandoned warehouse on the town's outskirts. Warner led a team there at dusk. The building was a maze of rusted machinery and shadows. Flashlights cut through the gloom, revealing a makeshift lair, sleeping bag, canned food, and chillingly a new notebook. Pages filled with plans for future crimes, each cross-referenced to historical murders. But Daniel was gone, slipped away like smoke. On the wall, scrawled in chalk, "The perfect crime is the one they never solve." The investigation intensified. Warner brought in FBI profiler agent Lisa Grant, a specialist in behavioral analysis. Grant reviewed the files, her face paling. "This isn't just copying," she said. "He's evolving them. Each kill fixes a flaw in the original. Better concealment, no witnesses. His autism gives him hyperfocus. He sees patterns we miss," she warned. "He's not stopping. This is his masterpiece, a symphony of death." Emily, now unofficially involved, couldn't shake the feeling Daniel was watching her. One night, returning home, she found her door ajar. Inside, nothing was missing, but on her kitchen table lay a single rose, wilted, thorns intact. It mirrored a detail from a 1940s case Daniel had once recited to her. Her blood ran cold. Was this a threat or an invitation? As August wore on, the body count rose. A third victim, a schoolteacher named Karen Soto, was found in her classroom. Desk arranged with books open to pages about infamous killers. Her death. Asphyxiation staged like a 1950s unsolved strangling. The police were baffled, the community terrified. Warner vowed to catch him, but Daniel was always one step ahead, his knowledge of history his ultimate weapon. In the quiet moments, Warner wondered about Daniel's origins. Orphaned young, institutionalized, his mind a vault of horrors. What had turned fascination into action? A trigger, perhaps. The anniversary of his parents' death ruled accidental but suspicious in hindsight. Had Daniel discovered something? The thought lingered, a dark thread in the tapestry of madness. Emily, driven by guilt, began her own hunt. She revisited Daniel's notebooks from the hospital, smuggled out in secret. Hidden codes emerged, dates, locations, a pattern pointing to a final act. But as she deciphered, a shadow fell across her window. Daniel or paranoia? The chase was on. A game of cat and mouse where the mouse knew every trap ever set. The air in Willow Creek grew heavier as August 1996 dragged on, each day tightening the town's grip of fear. The discovery of Karen Soto's body in her classroom had shattered the illusion of safety. Her death, staged with books splayed open to pages about infamous killers, was a taunt. A message from Daniel Kessler that he wasn't just killing, he was performing. The police station became a hive of chaos, phones ringing with tips from panicked residents, each shadow in an alleyway now a potential killer. Detective Paul Warner barely slept, his desk buried under files of Daniel's hospital records, crime scene photos, and photocopies of his cryptic notebooks. FBI profiler Agent Lisa Grant worked alongside him, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the town's unraveling nerves. She saw what others missed. Daniel wasn't just recreating murders. He was rewriting them, perfecting them, as if history were a rough draft he was revising with blood. Emily Carver, meanwhile, was spiraling. The wilted rose on her kitchen table haunted her, its thorns a silent threat. She hadn't told Warner about it, afraid he'd dismiss her as paranoid or worse, pull her from the investigation. She wasn't an official part of it, but her connection to Daniel, her months of observing him, listening to his eerie recitations, made her feel responsible. She pored over the smuggled hospital notebooks at night, her apartment lit only by a desk lamp, the windows locked tight. The pages were a labyrinth of Daniel's mind, timelines, sketches, and coded annotations that seemed to predict his next move. One entry caught her eye, a date, August 15, 1996, circled with the words "the final canvas" scrawled beside it. It was 3 days away. Emily cross-referenced the date with Daniel's historical obsessions. It matched the anniversary of a 1947 murder in Los Angeles, a case known as the Black Dahlia's sister. The victim, Margaret Wells, was found dissected and posed in a vacant lot, her body arranged like a grotesque sculpture. The killer was never caught, the case overshadowed by the more famous Black Dahlia murder months earlier. Daniel's notes described Margaret's scene in chilling detail, the precise angles of her limbs, the way her hair was fanned out like a halo, the single white glove left beside her. Emily's stomach churned. If Daniel was planning a final canvas, he was building to something big, something that would eclipse his previous crimes. She took her findings to Warner, who was now treating Daniel as the prime suspect. The warehouse lair had yielded more clues. A map of Willow Creek with marked locations, including the lot where Laura Hensley was found and the park where Michael Reed was killed. The classroom where Karen Soto died was circled too, with a question mark next to it, as if Daniel had been testing himself. Grant analyzed the map, her voice steady but grim. He's not random. Each location has historical significance tied to the original crimes he's mimicking. The lot was an industrial site in the 1920s, the park a public square in the 1930s. The classroom, he chose it because a school was the backdrop for a 1950s case. He's staging a gallery of death, each piece a tribute to his studies. Warner deployed officers to patrol potential sites tied to Daniel's historical cases. But Willow Creek was small, its police force stretched thin. The FBI sent reinforcements, but even they struggled to predict Daniel's next move. His ability to vanish, leaving no fingerprints, no witnesses, was uncanny. Grant theorized it was his autism at work. His hyper-focus allowed him to anticipate police procedures, to exploit their weaknesses. He studied investigations as obsessively as he studied murders, she said. He knows how we think, how we fail. Emily, driven by a mix of guilt and determination, began retracing Daniel's steps herself. She visited the warehouse again, slipping past the police tape under cover of darkness. The air inside was stale, thick with the smell of rust and decay. Her flashlight caught something new, a scrap of paper wedged under a crate missed by the initial sweep. It was a library checkout slip dated months earlier, for a book on forensic chemistry. The borrower's name was obscured, but Emily knew it was Daniel. The book detailed how to neutralize DNA evidence, how to manipulate a crime scene to mislead investigators. She pocketed the slip, her hand shaking, and left before anyone could catch her. Back home, she decoded more of Daniel's notebook. A pattern emerged. Each victim was chosen not for who they were, but for what they represented. Laura, the librarian, mirrored the solitary life of Evelyn Thorpe, the 1923 victim. Michael, the accountant, echoed the 1931 businessman, a loner with no family. Karen, the teacher, fit the profile of a 1950s victim, a woman who worked late unnoticed. Daniel wasn't killing randomly. He was casting his victims like actors in a play, each death a scene in his twisted masterpiece. But who was next? And why August 15? The answer came from an unlikely source. Sarah Mills, the librarian, called Emily late one night, her voice trembling. "I found something in the library in the back where he used to sit." It was a single page torn from one of Daniel's notebooks, left behind like a breadcrumb. It described the 1947 Margaret Wells case, but with a chilling addition. A sketch of a new victim, a woman in her 30s, brunette, standing in a public square. The square was recognizable, Willow Creek's town center, a place bustling with people during the day but eerily empty at night. The sketch showed the woman's body arranged like Margaret's with a note, "The canvas must be seen." Emily shared the sketch with Warner and Grant. The profiler's face darkened. "He's escalating. This isn't just a recreation, it's a statement. He wants the world to notice." They set up surveillance in the town center, plainclothes officers blending into the evening crowds, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel was watching them too. She remembered his questions at the hospital. How do you hide in plain sight? He wasn't just planning a murder, he was planning to be there unseen when the body was found. On August 14th, the town was on edge. Posters of Daniel's face taken from hospital records were plastered across Willow Creek. Tips flooded in, but none led anywhere. Emily, unable to sit still, walked the town center that evening, her eyes scanning every face. She passed a man in a hooded jacket, his head down and her heart raced. Was it him? She followed, keeping her distance, but he slipped into an alley and vanished. When she reached the spot, all she found was a single white glove, pristine, lying on the pavement. A chilling nod to the 1947 case. That night, Warner called a meeting. The FBI had cross-referenced Daniel's notes with missing persons reports. A woman named Rachel Vance, 34, a local florist, hadn't been seen since leaving her shop the previous day. Her description matched the sketch. Brunette, average height, solitary. Warner's voice was hoarse. "If he's following the pattern, she's already dead. Or will be by tomorrow." Grant added, "He's not just killing, he's curating. This final canvas is his endgame. His way of proving he's outsmarted history." As midnight approached, Emily sat in her apartment, the notebook open before her. The rose on her table, now dry and brittle, seemed to mock her. She realized something chilling. Daniel wasn't just targeting strangers. The rose, the questions, the way he'd looked at her in the hospital. He was pulling her into his game. Was she the next victim? Or something else entirely? A witness to his perfection? The clock ticked closer to August 15th and the town held its breath, waiting for Daniel Kessler to unveil his final act. The night of August 14th, 1996, draped Willow Creek in a suffocating stillness, as if the town itself sensed the storm about to break. Emily Carver sat in her dimly lit apartment, the smuggled notebook trembling in her hands. The pages, dense with Daniel Kessler's meticulous handwriting, seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The sketch of the woman in the town square, Rachel Vance, she now feared, stared back at her, the penciled lines capturing an eerie calm in the victim's lifeless pose. The note beside it, "The canvas must be seen," echoed in her mind like a taunt. Emily's eyes darted to the wilted rose on her table, its thorns sharper in her imagination. Was Daniel playing with her, drawing her into his twisted performance? Or was she already part of it, cast in a role she didn't yet understand? At the police station, Detective Paul Warner and FBI agent Lisa Grant pored over maps and timelines, their faces etched with exhaustion. The town center was under heavy surveillance, officers stationed at every corner. But Daniel's ability to vanish made their efforts feel futile. Grant traced her finger across the map, stopping at the square. "This is his stage," she said. The 1947 Margaret Wells case was public, brazen, a body left where hundreds would see it. "He's not hiding this time. He wants an audience." Warner slammed a fist on the desk. "Then why can't we find him? No prints, no sightings, nothing. It's like he's not even human." Grant's eyes narrowed. "He's human. Too human. His mind is a machine calculating every variable. He's been planning this since he was in that hospital, maybe longer." Emily, unable to stay still, drove to the town center despite Warner's warnings to stay out of it. The square was quiet, streetlights casting long shadows across the cobblestones. She walked the perimeter, her breath shallow, searching for anything, a clue, a sign. The white glove she'd found the previous night was now with the police, being analyzed for traces of Daniel. But she couldn't shake the feeling he'd left it for her. As she passed a bench, she noticed something carved into the wood. EC 815, her initials. Tomorrow's date. Her blood ran cold. She called Warner immediately, her voice shaking as she described the carving. He told her to get out of there, to go home and lock her doors. But Emily couldn't. If Rachel Vance was the next victim, she had to do something. Back at her apartment, Emily dug deeper into Daniel's notebook. The coded entries were unraveling, revealing a chilling logic. Each murder was a correction of a historical flaw. Laura Hensley's killer had left no fingerprints, unlike the 1923 case. Michael Reed's strangulation was cleaner than the 1931 poisoning. Karen Soto's classroom scene was staged with precision the 1950s killer lacked. Daniel was refining history, erasing the mistakes of past murderers. But the 1947 Margaret Wells case was different. It was already near perfect, the killer never caught, the body a spectacle. What could Daniel improve? The answer lay in his final note. The canvas must be seen by the one who understands. Emily's heart pounded. Was she the one? Had Daniel chosen her to witness his masterpiece? She called Sarah Mills, the librarian, desperate for more insight. Sarah, still shaken, mentioned a detail she'd forgotten. Daniel had once asked about local festivals, specifically the annual Willow Creek Harvest Fair, held in the town square every August 15th. He wanted to know how many people would be there, what time it started, Sarah said. I thought he was just curious. Emily's mind raced. The fair drew hundreds, families, vendors, tourists. It was the perfect stage for Daniel's final canvas, a public display to cement his legacy. She relayed this to Warner, who cursed under his breath. We'll flood the square tomorrow. He's not getting away. The morning of August 15th dawned gray and heavy, clouds threatening rain. The fair was in full swing by noon, the square bustling with music, food stalls, and laughter. Undercover officers mingled with the crowd, their eyes scanning for Daniel's slight frame, his dark hair, his unblinking stare. Emily, against Warner's orders, was there too, her heart pounding as she moved through the throng. She felt exposed, as if Daniel's eyes were on her, hidden in the sea of faces. Grant had warned that Daniel's autism made him hyper-aware of patterns, crowd movements, police tactics. He'd know how to blend in, how to slip through. At 2 p.m., a scream pierced the air. The crowd parted near the center of the square, revealing a horrific sight. Rachel Vance's body, posed on a makeshift platform of wooden crates, her limbs arranged with unnatural precision, her hair fanned out, a white glove resting beside her. The scene was an exact replica of Margaret Wells's 1947 murder, down to the single rose tucked into her hand. The crowd froze, some screaming, others running, as officers pushed through. Warner shouted orders, his face pale. Emily stood rooted, her eyes locked on Rachel's lifeless form. It was perfect, grotesque, a masterpiece of horror. Grant approached, her voice low. He's here. He's watching. They scanned the crowd, but Daniel was nowhere. The crime scene was pristine. No prints, no fibers, just the body and the glove. Forensic teams swarmed, but Emily knew they'd find nothing. Daniel had planned this too well. As the police cordoned off the area, Emily noticed something. A small folded note tucked into Rachel's sleeve, missed in the initial chaos. She pointed it out to Warner, who opened it with gloved hands. Inside, in Daniel's neat script, "For EC, you saw it first." Emily's knees buckled. Warner grabbed her arm. "You're not safe. He's fixated on you." Grant agreed, her voice urgent. "This isn't just about the murders. It's personal. He's communicating with you, Emily." They whisked her to the station, where she recounted every interaction with Daniel, his questions, his stares, the rose. Grant's analysis was chilling. He sees you as part of his narrative, maybe the only one who understands his work. He's not done with you. As night fell, the fair was shut down, the town square a crime scene. Warner doubled Emily's protection, stationing an officer outside her apartment. But the note burned in her mind. Daniel wasn't just a killer. He was a storyteller, and she was his audience. The notebook's final pages hinted at one more act. Something beyond the 1947 case, something personal. She found an entry about his parents' 1994 car accident, ruled accidental but with odd details. Brake lines tampered with, no skid marks. Had Daniel orchestrated that too? Was this his origin? The spark that turned obsession into action? Emily barely slept, her mind racing. She rechecked the notebook, finding a hidden code. Coordinates leading to an abandoned church on the edge of town. The date next to it was August 16th, tomorrow. She didn't tell Warner. She knew he'd stop her, but she couldn't wait. If Daniel was there, she had to face him. Not as a victim, but as the one who'd seen his canvas, the one who might end it. The church loomed in her mind, its steeple a dark silhouette against the coming dawn. Daniel was waiting, and so was his final secret. The dawn of August 16, 1996, broke over Willow Creek with a gray, oppressive weight, as if the sky itself mourned the horrors unfolding below. Emily Carver stood in her apartment, clutching Daniel Kessler's notebook, the coordinates to the abandoned church burning in her mind. The page was worn, its edges frayed from her obsessive rereading. The cryptic note, "August 16th, the truth begins where faith ends," felt like a summons, a dare. She hadn't told Detective Warner or Agent Grant about her plan. They'd lock her away for her own safety, but Emily knew she couldn't sit back. Daniel had made this personal, leaving the note at Rachel Vance's crime scene addressing her directly. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was part of his story, whether she wanted to be or not. The church, St. Agnes, sat on the outskirts of town, its steeple a crumbling relic against the horizon. It had been abandoned since the 1980s, its pews rotted, its stained glass windows shattered by vandals. Emily drove there alone, her hands trembling on the wheel, the police radio she'd borrowed crackling with static. She'd told herself this was about stopping Daniel, but deep down she needed answers. Why her? Why these murders? And what was the truth he'd promised? The notebook's reference to his parents' 1994 car accident gnawed at her. The police report, which she'd accessed through a contact at the station, noted tampered brake lines but no suspects. Had Daniel even then been practicing? She parked a quarter-mile from the church, approaching on foot to avoid detection. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The church loomed ahead, its doors ajar, shadows spilling out like a warning. Emily's flashlight cut through the gloom as she stepped inside, her footsteps echoing on the cracked stone floor. Dust motes danced in the beam and the air felt heavy, as if the building held its breath. She scanned the pews, the altar, the broken organ in the corner. Nothing. Then, a faint sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping from the back of the church, where the sacristy door hung crooked on its hinges. Emily's heart pounded as she approached, her hand gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The tapping grew louder, deliberate like Morse code. She pushed the door open, revealing a small room cluttered with debris, old hymnals, a rusted candelabra, and a table covered with papers. There in the corner sat Daniel Kessler. He was thinner than she remembered, his dark hair longer, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that froze her in place. He held a pen, tapping it against a new notebook, its pages filled with fresh sketches and notes. "You came," he said, his voice calm, almost warm. "I knew you would." Emily's mouth went dry. "Daniel, you need to stop. The police are coming." It was a lie, she hadn't told them, but she hoped it would rattle him. It didn't. He smiled, that same unsettling smile from the hospital. They won't find me. Not yet. Not until it's finished. He gestured to the table, where photos of his victims, Laura, Michael, Karen, Rachel, were pinned to a map of Willow Creek. Each was linked to a historical case with notes on how he'd improved them. But at the center was something new. A photo of Emily taken weeks ago outside the hospital. Her breath caught. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel tilted his head as if studying a puzzle. "You listened, you saw, you understood the patterns." He tapped the notebook. "This is my work, Emily. Every murder in history, every mistake, every flaw, I've fixed them. But you're the witness, the one who sees the art." His words were chilling, not just for their content, but for their sincerity. He believed this was art, not madness. Emily's eyes darted to the notebook. She saw her name scrawled repeatedly, alongside references to a 1908 case. A woman lured to a church, killed as a sacrifice to expose a town's hypocrisy. The parallels were unmistakable. "You're not killing me," she said, forcing steel into her voice. Daniel shook his head. "Not you. Never you. You're the one who tells the story." He slid a page toward her, a detailed plan for a fifth murder set for that night. The victim. Dr. Raymond Holt, the psychiatrist who'd dismissed Daniel's questions, who'd failed to see the danger. The method, poison, staged in his office, mimicking a 1920s case where a doctor was killed to cleanse a corrupt institution. Emily's mind raced. Holt was at the hospital now, oblivious to the threat. She needed to warn him, but Daniel was watching her, his gaze unyielding. "Why Holt?" she asked, buying time. Daniel's expression darkened. He lied. "He knew about my parents, about the accident." "It wasn't an accident." He pulled a folded document from his pocket, a coroner's report from 1994, marked with his own annotations. It confirmed the tampered brakes, but also noted a sedative in his mother's system, unreported in the official file. "Holt was their doctor," Daniel said. He covered it up. "For money. For power. I was 14, I saw it all." The pieces clicked. Daniel's obsession with murders hadn't started with books. It started with his parents' deaths, a betrayal he'd uncovered years later. His killings weren't just recreations. They were a quest for justice, twisted by his fractured mind. Emily's fear mixed with pity. "Daniel, this won't bring them back," she said softly. He stood, his movements swift, and for a moment she thought he'd attack. Instead, he handed her the notebook. "Take it, tell them." But not yet. Before she could respond, he slipped through a back door, vanishing into the dawn. Emily ran to her car, the notebook clutched to her chest. She called Warner, her voice frantic, relaying everything. Holt, the church, Daniel's confession. The police descended on St. Agnes, but Daniel was gone, leaving only a single white glove on the altar, another nod to 1947. Warner sent a unit to the hospital to protect Holt while Grant analyzed the notebook. "He's not done," she warned. "This is his origin story, but there's more. He's building to something bigger." At the hospital, Holt was shaken but unharmed, unaware of the danger he'd been in. He admitted to knowing Daniel's parents, but denied any cover-up. "They were troubled," he said. "The accident was a tragedy, nothing more." But his eyes betrayed doubt, and Emily didn't believe him. She handed the notebook to Warner, who paged through it, his face grim. The final entry was a single line. "The truth is in the silence." Below it, coordinates for another location, a derelict factory, set for August 17th. As the day wore on, Emily felt the weight of Daniel's words. She was his witness, but to what end? Was he leading her to stop him or to complete his story? The factory loomed in her mind, a final stage for his madness. Warner planned a sting operation, but Emily knew Daniel was always one step ahead. She studied the 1908 case again, noting its ending. The killer had surrendered, but only after his truth was revealed. Was Daniel following that script too? Night fell, and the factory waited, its rusted gates a portal to the unknown. Emily knew she'd be there despite the danger, driven by a need to see this through. The derelict factory on the edge of Willow Creek stood like a monument to decay, its rusted skeleton looming under the moonless sky of August 16, 1996. Emily Carver's breath fogged in the chilly night air as she parked a safe distance away, her heart hammering. The coordinates in Daniel Kessler's notebook pointed here, to this crumbling relic of the town's industrial past. The final entry, The truth is in the silence echoed in her mind, a riddle she couldn't unravel. She knew she should have waited for Detective Warner and Agent Grant, who were mobilizing a tactical team, but the pull of Daniel's game was too strong. He'd chosen her as his witness, and this factory was his final stage. Whatever truth he meant to reveal, it was here, waiting in the shadows. The police were minutes behind, their sirens muted to avoid alerting Daniel. Emily slipped through a gap in the chain-link fence, her flashlight dimmed to a faint glow. The factory's interior was a maze of twisted metal and broken machinery, the air thick with the smell of oil and rot. Her footsteps crunched on shattered glass, each sound amplifying her fear. She clutched the notebook, its weight a reminder of Daniel's mind, brilliant, fractured, and terrifyingly precise. The 1908 case he'd referenced, where a killer surrendered after exposing a town's secrets, felt like a blueprint. But Daniel wasn't that killer. He didn't make mistakes, didn't leave loose ends. So why lead her here? She moved deeper, guided by instinct and the notebook's cryptic clues. A faint light flickered ahead, coming from a cavernous room where massive steel vats once processed chemicals. As she stepped inside, her flashlight caught a chilling sight. A circle of candles, their flames casting eerie shadows on the walls. At the center, a table held a single object, a tape recorder, its red light glowing. Beside it, another white glove, pristine against the grime. Emily's pulse raced. This was no crime scene, not yet. It was a message. She pressed play on the recorder, and Daniel's voice filled the room, calm and deliberate. Emily, if you're here, you've followed the path. You've seen my work, my corrections to history's errors. But this isn't about murder. It's about truth. My parents didn't die by accident. They were silenced. Dr. Holt knows why. The town knows why. Look in the notebook, page 47. The tape clicked off, leaving the silence deafening. Emily flipped to the page, her hand shaking. It detailed a 1970s scandal in Willow Creek, corrupt officials, a pharmaceutical company, and a cover-up involving experimental drugs tested on hospital patients, including Daniel's parents. The car accident, Daniel wrote, was staged to keep them quiet after they threatened to expose it. Holt's name appeared repeatedly linked to payoffs. Emily's mind reeled. Was this Daniel's motive, not just vengeance, but exposure? She scanned the room, expecting him to step from the shadows, but it was empty. Then a noise, a soft scrape from above. She aimed her flashlight at the catwalk overhead, catching a glimpse of movement. Daniel! She called, her voice echoing. No response. She climbed the rusted stairs, her fear warring with determination. At the top, she found a small bundle, a stack of documents yellowed and brittle, tied with string. They were hospital records from 1994, detailing unauthorized drug trials. Daniel's mother's name was there, alongside notes about her agitation and a recommendation for containment. Holt's signature was at the bottom. Before she could process it, footsteps echoed below. Warner and Grant burst in with a team, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. Emily! Warner shouted, his voice sharp with anger and relief. What the hell are you doing here? She held up the documents, her voice trembling. It's about his parents. Holt was involved. Daniel's not just killing, he's exposing something. Grant took the papers, her eyes scanning quickly. This is big, she said. If it's true, it's a motive. But where is he? The team swept the factory, finding no trace of Daniel. The candles, the recorder, the documents, it was all staged, another of his perfect scenes. Grant's voice was grim. He's toying with us. This is his 1908 case, exposing corruption, then vanishing. But he's not done. There's another move. Emily pointed to the notebook's final line, written in red. August 17th. The silence breaks. A new set of coordinates pointed to Willow Creek's old courthouse, a place tied to the 1970s scandal, where trials were allegedly rigged to protect the guilty. Warner radioed for surveillance at the courthouse, but Emily's gut twisted. Daniel wasn't there yet. He was still here somewhere, watching her reaction. She felt it in the prickle on her neck, the weight of unseen eyes. He's close, she whispered. Grant nodded, her hand on her weapon. He's always been close. His autism makes him a ghost, hyper-aware, calculating every detail. He knew you'd come here alone. The team found one more clue, a map in the bundle marked with the courthouse in a single word. Witness. Emily's name was written beside it. Warner cursed. He's fixated on you, Emily. You're not safe anywhere. They escorted her out, the documents secured as evidence. Back at the station, Grant analyzed the findings. The drug trials implicated not just Holt, but half the town's leadership from the 1990s. Council members, police chiefs, even the former mayor, all tied to a company that vanished after the scandal. Daniel's parents, whistleblowers, were collateral damage. His murders, Grant theorized, were a twisted justice, each victim linked to someone who'd benefited from the cover-up. Laura's cousin was a councilman. Michael's firm handled the company's accounts. Karen's husband was a retired cop. Rachel's father a judge. Emily felt sick. Daniel wasn't just a killer, he was an avenger, his genius warped by grief and betrayal. But why her? She remembered his words in the church. You're the one who tells the story. He needed her to expose the truth, to finish what his parents couldn't. But the courthouse loomed, and August 17th was hours away. Warner planned a sting, flooding the site with officers, but Emily knew Daniel would anticipate it. The 1908 killer had walked into a trap, surrendering willingly. Would Daniel? Or was this another misdirection? She spent the night at the station under guard, poring over the notebook. A hidden page revealed a personal note from Daniel. Emily, you saw me when no one else did. You asked about my drawings, my questions. You cared. The truth is yours now. Tears stung her eyes. She'd pitied him in the hospital, seen his isolation, but never imagined it would lead here. The documents confirmed Holt's role. He'd been paid to falsify records to label Daniel's parents as unstable. Had he known about the breaks? Emily's anger flared. Holt was still at the hospital, denying everything, but his fear was palpable. As dawn approached, Emily made a decision. She'd go to the courthouse not as bait, but as the witness Daniel wanted. She slipped out, leaving a note for Warner. I have to end this. The courthouse, a grand building now half abandoned, waited like a tomb. Inside, she'd find Daniel, or his final act. The Willow Creek Courthouse stood like a forgotten sentinel, its marble steps cracked and its columns stained by years of neglect. On the morning of August 17, 1996, Emily Carver approached it with a mix of dread and resolve, the weight of Daniel Kessler's notebook in her bag like a lead anchor. The air was thick with the threat of rain, the sky a bruised gray that mirrored her mood. She'd slipped away from the police station before dawn, leaving her note for Detective Warner. I have to end this. She knew he'd be furious, but she also knew Daniel had chosen her for this moment. The coordinates, the word witness, her name scrawled in his meticulous hand. It all pointed here, to this decaying monument of justice where decades ago, a pharmaceutical scandal had been buried under bribes and lies. Inside, the courthouse was a cavern of echoes, its grand hall silent save for the drip of a leaking roof. Emily's flashlight swept across faded murals and dusty benches, her heart pounding as she moved toward the main courtroom. The 1908 case Daniel referenced had ended here, in a courtroom where the killer surrendered after exposing a town's corruption. Was this his plan, to turn himself in or to unveil one final horror? The notebook's last entry, the silence breaks, suggested a revelation, but Emily feared it came with a cost. She checked her watch. 6:45 a.m. Warner's team would be here soon, but she needed to find Daniel first. The courtroom doors creaked as she pushed them open. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew. Rows of pews stretched toward a judge's bench, its wood warped by time. At the center of the room, illuminated by a single shaft of light from a broken skylight, stood a table. On it, a new setup, a stack of documents, a white glove, and a small wooden box, intricately carved. Emily's breath caught. It was another of Daniel's stages, but no body, not yet. She approached, her footsteps loud in the silence, and opened the box. Inside was a single cassette tape labeled for EC. Her hands shook as she slipped it into the portable player she'd brought. Stolen from the hospital's therapy room. Daniel's voice crackled to life, steady and deliberate. Emily, you're here because you see what they don't. The truth isn't in the killings, it's in what they hide. My parents found it, and they died for it. Holt, the council, the judges, they built this town on lies. The drugs they tested killed people, and they called it progress. I've shown you the proof. Now show the world. The tape paused, then continued. The final act is not a death. It's you. Tell the story. Break the silence. The tape ended with a soft click, leaving Emily frozen. No murder, no victim. It didn't make sense. Daniel's pattern was blood, precision, spectacle. She rifled through the documents on the table. They were internal memos from the 1970s, detailing the drug trials. Patients given untested compounds, side effects ignored, deaths misreported as accidents. Daniel's parents' names appeared repeatedly, their complaints dismissed as paranoia. A final memo, signed by Dr. Holt, recommended their removal to protect the program. Emily's anger surged. Holt wasn't just complicit, he was the architect. But where was Daniel? Was this his surrender? Leaving the evidence for her to deliver? A faint sound broke her thoughts. A shuffle from the balcony above. She aimed her flashlight, catching a glimpse of Daniel's pale face before he ducked out of sight. "Daniel!" she called, her voice firm despite her fear. "It's over. I have the proof. You don't need to do this anymore." Silence. Then his voice, soft but clear from the shadows. "It's not over until they listen." She climbed the stairs to the balcony, her flashlight shaking. He was there, sitting cross-legged, a new notebook in his lap. His eyes met hers, calm but intense. "You found it," he said. "The truth." Emily held up the documents. "This is enough. The police are coming. They'll expose Holt, the others. You don't need to kill again." Daniel tilted his head, studying her. "You think I want to kill?" "I wanted them to see. Laura, Michael, Karen, Rachel, they were messages, warnings. Each one tied to the guilty, but you're the voice." His words chilled her. He wasn't confessing remorse, he was justifying his art. Before she could respond, the courtroom doors burst open. Warner and Grant stormed in with a tactical team, their shouts echoing. "Emily, get down!" Warner yelled. She raised her hand, stepping back, but Daniel didn't move. He sat unblinking as officers swarmed the balcony, guns drawn. "Daniel Kessler, you're under arrest!" one shouted. He didn't resist, his gaze fixed on Emily. As they cuffed him, he whispered, "Tell them." She nodded, clutching the documents, her heart torn between relief and dread. At the station, Daniel was silent, refusing to speak except to ask for Emily. Warner, furious at her recklessness, still listened as she explained the documents, the tape, the scandal. Grant's face was grim. He's orchestrated everything, every murder, every clue leading to this. He wanted the truth out, but on his terms. The documents were explosive. Names, dates, payments, all implicating Holt and half the town's elite. Warner sent officers to arrest Holt, who was found packing a bag at his home ready to flee. He denied nothing, his arrogance crumbling under the weight of evidence. But Daniel's surrender felt too clean. Emily pored over the new notebook handed over by the police. It detailed his crimes, each a correction of a historical murder, but also a personal vendetta. Laura's cousin had lobbied for the drug company. Michael's firm hid its profits. Karen's husband buried evidence. Rachel's father dismissed whistleblower cases. Daniel had chosen them to expose the rot, but the final page was blank, marked only with EC and a question mark. What was her role? Grant theorized, he's not done. The 1908 killer surrendered, but only after ensuring his story was told. Daniel's given you the evidence, but he expects you to act. Emily felt the weight of it. The town was already reeling. News of the scandal leaked, headlines screaming about corruption and murder. But Daniel's final act wasn't clear. Was he truly finished, or was this another layer of his game? As Daniel sat in a holding cell, his eyes distant, Emily visited him, separated by glass. "Why me?" she asked again. He leaned forward, his voice barely audible. "Because you cared enough to listen. Now they'll listen to you." He slid a folded note under the glass. Coordinates, dated August 18th. Another location. The old pharmaceutical plant, the heart of the scandal. Warner was skeptical. "He's manipulating us even now." But Emily knew she had to go. The truth wasn't just in the documents, it was in Daniel's final move. The plant, abandoned since the 1970s, was where it all began, and where she feared it might end. The old pharmaceutical plant loomed on the horizon like a scar on Willow Creek's outskirts, its crumbling smokestacks clawing at the dawn sky of August 18, 1996. Emily Carver's hands gripped the steering wheel as she approached. The coordinates from Daniel Kessler's note burned into her memory. The police station was still buzzing with the fallout of Dr. Holt's arrest. and the explosive revelations about the 1970s drug trials, but Emily couldn't wait for Warner's team. Daniel's words in the courthouse, "Now they'll listen to you," echoed like a challenge. The plant was the epicenter of the scandal that had cost his parents their lives, and Emily knew this was where his story would end. But how? Was he luring her to another crime, or was this the final piece of his truth? The plant's gates were rusted open, the chain-link fence sagging under years of neglect. Emily parked and slipped through, her flashlight casting a weak beam across the cracked pavement. The air smelled of chemicals and mold, a reminder of the plant's dark history. The notebook, now in police custody, had detailed the trials. Patients dosed with untested compounds, side effects buried, deaths labeled as accidents. Daniel's parents had been among the whistleblowers silenced in a staged car crash. The documents Emily found in the courthouse confirmed it, but Daniel's note suggested more, a final revelation hidden here in the ruins. Inside, the plant was a labyrinth of shadowed corridors and cavernous rooms, machinery frozen in time. Her footsteps echoed as she moved deeper, guided by the coordinates to a storage wing. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water or creak of settling metal. She reached a heavy steel door, its lock broken, and pushed it open. The room beyond was vast, its ceiling partially collapsed, letting in slivers of gray light. At the center stood a makeshift shrine, a table covered with photographs, newspaper clippings, and medical files, all illuminated by a circle of flickering candles. Emily's heart sank. It was another of Daniel's stages, but no body, not yet. The photographs showed Daniel's parents, smiling in happier times, alongside images of other victims from the trials, faces forgotten by history. The clippings detailed the scandal, abruptly cut off in 1975 when the company dissolved, its executives vanishing with their profits. The medical files were the most damning. Patient logs signed by Holt, documenting lethal side effects ignored for the sake of progress. At the table's edge sat a final white glove, pristine, and a note in Daniel's handwriting, "For EC, the heart of the lie." Beneath it was a key, old and tarnished with no label. Emily's hands trembled as she pocketed the key and scanned the files. One name stood out, Thomas Grayson, the company's CEO, who'd disappeared after the scandal. A handwritten note from Daniel claimed Grayson was still alive, living under an alias in a nearby town. Was this Daniel's endgame, to expose the man who'd orchestrated it all? She searched the table for more clues and found a small locked metal box hidden under a stack of papers. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a single item, a vial of amber liquid, labeled with a chemical formula and the words, "Trial 47 fatal." It was the drug that had killed Daniel's parents, preserved like a relic. A soft thud echoed from the far end of the room. Emily spun, her flashlight catching a shadow moving behind a stack of crates. "Daniel?" she called, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. No answer, but the shadow shifted again. She stepped closer, gripping the vial, her mind racing. If Daniel was here, was he planning to kill Grayson? Or was she the target, the final witness to his truth? She remembered his words. The final act is not a death. But trust in Daniel was a dangerous gamble. Before she could move, headlights pierced the broken windows. Warner's team had arrived, their shouts cutting through the silence as they stormed the plant. "Emily, where are you?" Warner's voice was frantic. She called back, guiding them to the storage wing. As officers flooded in, their flashlights sweeping the room, Emily pointed to the shrine. "He's here, or was. This is what he wanted me to find." Warner's face darkened as he scanned the files. "Grayson. If he's alive, we'll find him. But where's Kessler?" The team searched the plant, but Daniel was gone, as always. The shadow Emily saw had vanished, leaving only a faint trail of footprints in the dust leading to a broken window. Grant, analyzing the scene, shook her head. "He's not running, he's directing. This is his final act, exposing the scandal through you. But he's not done. That vial, it's a message. He wants Grayson." Warner ordered a trace on Grayson's alias, cross-referencing it with property records. A hit came back. A secluded cabin 20 miles away registered under a false name. It fit Daniel's pattern, remote, tied to history, a perfect stage. Emily insisted on going despite Warner's protests. "He's leading me there." "I'm the witness," Grant agreed, her voice grim. "He's orchestrated every step." If Grayson's alive, Daniel's already there or will be. The team mobilized, leaving Emily under guard as they headed to the cabin. But she couldn't stay behind. Slipping away again, she drove alone. The vial and key in her pocket, the notebook's words burned into her mind. The cabin was her last chance to confront Daniel, to end his game. When she arrived, the cabin was dark, its windows boarded. The door was ajar and inside a faint glow flickered. She stepped in, finding another shrine. More candles, more photos, and a figure slumped in a chair. Grayson alive but bound, his eyes wide with terror. Daniel stood beside him, holding a syringe filled with amber liquid. "Emily," he said, his voice calm. "You found the heart." Before she could speak, Warner's team burst in, guns drawn. "Drop it, Kessler." Daniel didn't move, his eyes locked on Emily. "Tell them," he said, then plunged the syringe into his own arm. He collapsed, the vial's contents, Trial 47, taking effect instantly. Grayson screamed, confessing everything. The trials, the payoffs, the murders. Warner's team secured him, but Emily knelt by Daniel, his breath shallow. "Why?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "The truth is out." His eyes closed, his body still. The police swarmed, but Emily felt hollow. Daniel had won in his way, exposing the scandal, forcing the world to listen. But at what cost? The cabin, the vial, Grayson, it was his final canvas, and she was its voice. The cabin's air was thick with the weight of finality as Daniel Kessler's body lay still. The syringe of Trial 47 glinting in the dim light. Emily Carver stood frozen, her eyes locked on his lifeless form. The vial's amber liquid a silent testament to his last act. August 18, 1996 would be etched into Willow Creek's history, not just for the arrest of Thomas Grayson, the pharmaceutical CEO who'd orchestrated a decades-old scandal, but for the chilling genius of a man who'd turned murder into a message. Detective Warner's team secured the scene, their voices a blur as they cuffed Grayson, whose confessions spilled out in panicked bursts. The drug trials, the bribes, the murders to silence whistleblowers like Daniel's parents. But Emily's mind was elsewhere, replaying Daniel's final words. The truth is out. He'd chosen her to carry it, to break the silence that had festered in Willow Creek for decades. And now she stood at the edge of his story, a witness to a truth that felt heavier than she could bear. The days that followed were chaos. The documents from the factory, combined with Grayson's confession, unraveled a conspiracy that shook the town to its core. Dr. Raymond Holt, arrested alongside Grayson, crumbled under interrogation, admitting to falsifying records and taking payoffs to cover up the lethal trials. The headlines screamed of corruption, naming council members, judges, and police who'd profited from the pharmaceutical company's crimes. Laura Hensley, Michael Reed, Karen Soto, Rachel Vance, their deaths, Daniel's corrections of historical murders, were revealed as deliberate choices, each victim tied to someone complicit in the scandal. The town reeled, its sense of safety shattered, its trust in institutions broken. Protests erupted outside the courthouse, demanding justice for the victims of both the trials and Daniel's rampage. Emily, now a reluctant figure in the media storm, struggled with her role. Daniel had called her the witness, the one to tell his story, but at what cost? She'd spent nights poring over his notebooks, now public evidence piecing together his mind. His autism had given him a hyper-focused lens, turning grief into obsession, obsession into murder. The 1908 case, where a killer exposed a town's hypocrisy before surrendering, was his blueprint, but Daniel had gone further, crafting a narrative that forced the world to see Willow Creek's sins. His final act, injecting himself with the same drug that killed his parents, wasn't suicide, but a statement, a closing curtain on his twisted symphony. Emily couldn't shake the image of his faint smile, the peace in his eyes as he fell. Had he won or had he lost everything? Agent Lisa Grant, who'd stayed in town to wrap up the investigation, met Emily at the station a week later. "He used you," Grant said, her voice soft but firm. "Not as a victim, but as a conduit. He knew you'd dig, that you'd care. That's why he left the clues for you." Emily nodded, her throat tight. "But why me? I was just a nurse." Grant's eyes softened. "You saw him as human, not a case file. That's what he needed, someone to listen." Warner, haggard from sleepless nights, added, "You stopped him, Emily. You brought the truth out. But you need to let it go now." She tried, But the weight of Daniel's notebooks, his voice, his gaze, lingered like a shadow. The media frenzy grew. True crime shows dissecting Daniel's crimes, dubbing him the historian killer. Emily refused interviews, but the story spread. Fueled by the documents and Grayson's trial, Willow Creek became a cautionary tale, a town where secrets festered until a broken mind tore them open. Emily moved away, settling in a quiet city hours from the memories of that summer, but she kept Daniel's final note, the one from the courthouse, tucked in a drawer. "Tell them," it said. She did in her way, sharing the documents with journalists who exposed the scandal's full scope. The truth was out just as he'd wanted. To you, the viewer who've followed this harrowing journey through the labyrinth of Daniel Kessler's mind, you're part of something rare. You've dared to look into the abyss to confront the fragility of justice, the unpredictability of a mind pushed to its limits. You've seen how a single truth can unravel a town, how a man's pain can become a masterpiece of horror. Congratulations for reaching the end, for being among the few who've walked this dark path to its conclusion. You're not just a viewer. You're a seeker of the hidden, a witness to the inexplicable. Now, I invite you to share what this story stirred in you. In the comments, write, "This story changed how I see the human mind." By doing so, you join a community of those who dare to face the shadows, who seek to understand what most turn away from. Your words will mark you as one of the committed, those who carry the weight of this truth. Share this video with others, let it spread like a whisper in the dark, so more can uncover what Willow Creek tried to bury. The world needs to know what no one dares to tell. Subscribe to this channel. Become part of our circle of truth seekers, those who peer into the cracks of human nature where monsters and mysteries dwell. Let's keep this curiosity alive, chasing the stories that haunt and enlighten. Keep watching, because the next tale might be the one that changes you forever. The silence is broken. Now what will you do with the truth?